We are overrun with sexual predators, but even worse, we are overrun with people who protect them.
He took a PVC pipe because I questioned him whilst I was 7 months pregnant, and he hit me across my stomach with it, pushed me down on the bed, and he would rape me.
One time, she beat me so bad. I told his daughters, he's a rapist because this is what he's been doing to me when they're in there.
I would have said I was assaulted, and the police officer looked me dead in the eye and said, "Why would he want you?"
Because I am a woman. My children are presumed to take the citizenship of their father.
He always told me that this was something that fathers do with their daughters to express love and affection.
In 2015, when American astronaut Scott Kelly looked down from space and declared the Bahamas the most beautiful place from space, he was in fact reiterating what most of the world already knew. The Bahamas is a stunningly beautiful place with the clearest, brilliantly blue waters in the world. This beauty has drawn millions of tourists to its shores, but most visitors rarely think of the people that serve them, the ones outside the cloistered resorts and cruise ships that call this place home. Perhaps we've helped to cultivate this illusion. Not many people realize that Bahamians have outperformed the country's size of 400,000 people on the world stage. We are ranked #1 in the world for the number of Olympic gold medals our athletes possess per capita. Though the size of a small city in the US, multiple Bahamians suit up in the NBA and Major League Baseball and have done so for decades. Our writers, artists, poets, actors, filmmakers, and models are world-renowned, and we've produced brilliant academic professionals who lead major research institutions and are at the forefront of their fields. By any yardstick, our beautiful little country is world-class in many areas, except one. When it comes to the full rights of women as citizens and human beings, the country's beauty fades. Bahamian women do not possess equal rights under law. They do not possess the automatic right to pass their citizenship on to their children. If in a marriage, all rights pass on to their husband. She cannot make a major decision regarding her body without his consent. Sexual abuse, from childhood to adulthood, inside and outside marriage, is rampant. Violence against women is often public and brutal. Equal pay for equal work, a mirage. And time again, more qualified women have been passed over for men with lesser demonstrated ability, experience, and training in promotional exercises. Though a matrifocal society, few women ascend to national leadership despite making up more than half of the voting age population. This is the country that proclaims in international tourism advertisements that it's better in the Bahamas. But the irony of that claim is that that possibility did not apply to Bahamian women then or now. So used to smiling and hiding their struggles for complicated reasons, Bahamian women have historically kept silent about their struggles, their desires, their hope for equal rights under law, until now. Gender equality is when people of all genders have equal rights, responsibilities, and opportunities. Under the United Nations, there are 10 human rights treaty bodies. CEDAW, the Committee on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, deals specifically with the rights of women. CEDAW monitors the advancement of women's human rights in health, the legal framework, gender-based violence against women, and family relations around the world, and the compliance of each country to this treaty. In 1993, the Bahamas was one of 189 countries that signed the CEDAW Treaty, vowing to grant equal rights to women. But the very Constitution of the Bahamas continues to discriminate against women. In order to change this, a majority vote in a constitutional referendum is required. 30 years later, and after 2 referenda in which the majority voted no, the Constitution remains unchanged, and no legislation has been enacted to ensure equal rights for Bahamian women. The CEDAW Committee, which reviews countries' progress and makes recommendations for their compliance with the Convention, has 23 members from around the world. Bahamian lawyer, poet, filmmaker, and human and gender rights activist Marian Bethel is one of them.
I think that the referenda, both referenda, have been a catastrophe for various reasons. I think leadership is everything. Leadership in any country is everything, and it takes a political will to make something happen. I don't think either administration, because in 2009 it would have been the Free National Movement administration, in 2016 it would have been the PLP. Neither really had the political will, in my opinion. Neither were committed in a really substantive and authentic way to this issue of gender equality.
There was not enough public education. People didn't understand what they were voting for. And then what happened at last minute is that we also got the church involved with an agenda that they felt that the referendum was making a certain statement, so they came and muddied the water even further, and people then were not able to vote on the policy or the question at hand. They were voting based on emotion.
How do you get Bahamian women who are working class to believe this is even an issue that's important to them, right? How do you construct this in such a way that say, well, this is actually something we should fight for? If every other or half or even a third of Bahamian women, white, black, rich, poor, working class, college educated and not, get in the street and say, we want this now, they'll have it.
Women have been the backbone of this country since time immemorial. We were part of the majority rule movement. We fought for the suffrage for women and for men. We've been on the front lines with political parties since the 40s and 50s. We're the backbone of the churches. We're the backbones of the political parties, our families. For God's sake, just morally, domestically, we are entitled to correct the problem that was done in 1972, 1973 when the Constitution was made. It's unfathomable how that happened.
Discrimination on the basis of sex, gender, or sexual orientation are not recognized under the Constitution of the Bahamas, which therefore leaves the door open to the enactment of legislation that does discriminate on the basis of sex, gender, and sexual orientation. These not only curtail the rights of women as citizens and human beings with full body autonomy, but the impact of them benefits and upholds the power and place of Bahamian men. Under the Constitution, women married to non-Bahamian men cannot pass on their citizenship to their children born outside the Bahamas. Women married to non-Bahamian men cannot pass on citizenship to their husband, and men cannot pass on citizenship to their children born to a non-Bahamian woman when the parents are not married to each other.
So I moved to London in 2002. It was a career move. 2 years later, met my husband and married in 2006. We actually came here to get married. And my eldest daughter was born in London in 2008. and the youngest followed 2 years later in 2010. In 2012, I was offered a job here, and we moved here. It was when we were coming in that I fully realized what the situation was. I was asked where the children were born, and was I married to their father. And they were stamped for 90 days each.
It's something fundamentally wrong with that, because I should be able to do that on the same footing as my brothers, right? They shouldn't have more opportunities to give their children rights. And people say, well, you know, if you're married to a foreigner, why don't you go away? Why should I have to? This is my country. I was born here, I can decide where I want to live. So for me, it's about understanding those issues for us. So it's basically about how do we get to ensuring that we are equal before the law, because we're not.
My father is Bahamian. My mother is from Trinidad. I was born to them. They were married at the time. I was born in England. I was considered Bahamian at birth. My children are in the same circumstance. The only difference is their father is English, their mother is Bahamian. That's the only difference. They're not entitled. Does that make sense?
The 13th Amendment in the United States, which essentially proclaims slavery illegal, if that was to go to the majority of the population to vote on, you wouldn't be filming this, I wouldn't be sitting here, because we'd still be slaves, because the majority of the population would surely have put it down. The reality is that there are certain things, and we could go into the whole range of reasons why, that you cannot take to an uninformed majority, especially if there are other agendas that muddy the waters, okay? So that's the reality of why we're where we are. We are one of the few countries where the bestowing of rights are left to the people, to the majority of the people, okay? Most places, including the United States, including Britain, it's left to the legislature. They don't go to the people to decide. They decide that amongst themselves, amongst the legislature. That's why you select these people.
But what you're saying to me is, because I am a woman, because I carry X and Y chromosomes, my children are presumed to take the citizenship of their father. That's counterintuitive to me. I don't understand it.
While the passage of legislation does not automatically translate to improved conditions or better policies and systems to aggressively enforce new laws for Bahamian women, what the passage of new legislation does represent is a great place to start achieving gender equality in the Bahamas. Considering the fact that women make up more than 50% of the Bahamian population, the number of Bahamian women in Parliament has always been woefully lacking. Presently, there are 7 female members of Parliament out of a total of 39. Roughly 21% of our government are women who represent more than 50% of the population, and the current group is the largest representation of women in Parliament since the 1990s.
We know that in high school and also in terms of the tertiary level education that we have, women are really outperforming men, and we have 70-80% of the graduates being women, which is perfect, which is awesome, and I think we've done well in education. But that doesn't translate to leadership. Why do you have 13% of women in the parliament? You know, what happened to that? Why are women discouraged or not encouraged, or somehow feeling that that is not a space for them to be in?
We should have at least 30% women represented in Parliament or in Senate. And so we are very strong advocates of this. We are lobbying with various political parties, saying, listen, we women need a voice. We have something to say You know, and a lot of times this means helping to change the legislation and the constitutions of parties. The thing is, what I've found is we offer a lot of lip service, but when it comes to saying, no, we need 30%. Women are 55% of the electorate, and we are not even represented in Parliament.
Men are believed to be more rational, more sober, more temperate, and therefore better in leadership positions. Women want men to lead them, I find, often, not other women. So women participate in their own oppression. And so those cultural things are pretty hard to shake. So despite this disproportionate, this asymmetry between males and females in terms of higher education, that's not translating into who sits at the highest seat yet, right? So it might ultimately happen, but it hasn't happened yet.
So you need to have women around the table who push against the status quo, who push them into trying, at least thinking about something differently, and who push on those issues of social justice. If you have all men at the table with the groupthink, all of them probably went to the same school or around the same schools and whatever, supporting each other in the same lodge and whatever else. You need someone to come and shake it up. But you need to have that change, and it needs to be critical mass. So one woman in the cabinet can't do it. It's like a drop of water in the ocean.
In a deeply patriarchal, religious society like the Bahamas, many believe marital rape is an impossibility. But a new University of the Bahamas study reveals that nearly 4,000 women have been raped by their husbands in the Bahamas, or 1 in every 12 women of the 1,700 women surveyed. And a recent push by women to amend the Sexual Offenses Act to include marital rape suggests otherwise. The amendment has faced vocal resistance. In the Bahamas, women do not have the right to say no to sex in a marriage. And if a man forces her to have sex, no matter how violent the act, she has no recourse under law. The marital rape exception was brought to the Bahamas hundreds of years ago with colonialization. And even though Britain abolished this law in 1992 and went further in enacting laws to protect women against marital rape. Independent since 1973 and supposedly post-colonial, the Bahamas continues to keep this antiquated law on the books, despite having signed on to at least 5 international human rights conventions that specifically condemn marital rape. The hypocrisy is stunning. Definitely a two-faced nation.
The Bahamas still has not criminalized marital rape. Other countries, some countries like Trinidad, has criminalized marital rape. So we would ask the Bahamas, for example, to look at what Trinidad has done and to see how they might model legislation in that way, and what it would take to make that kind of progress. So very often we make recommendations based on regions, because clearly they may have the same kind of cultural and traditional kinds of aspects that would make sense.
The opposition to the marital rape bill has found a lot of oxygen from the church, all right? So the church has been very conservative on this and has definitely been a part of why the marital rape law hasn't been passed. And it boils down to, I don't need to repeat I don't think I need to explain the theology behind this notion that men and women are one, and how, and women must comply and give themselves. But the reality, well, my reality is that both are obligated to each other, but also that you don't get to not be a human with rights because you got married.
It's not logical, right? It's just basically suiting an agenda of I believe that my wife is my property, okay? And therefore, I mean, that's in fact, that's what they say. I've heard many people in the Christian community say, basically, it's a contract, right? And once the contract's signed, it's mine. So how I can rape my tanks. I've heard ministers of government say it. I've heard all sorts of people say it. But it's not logical. If the issue is consent, whomever does not give consent is therefore raped. The argument about, well, you know, my wife could falsely accuse me, well, a stranger can falsely accuse you.
As soon as you talk about marital rape, people say, well, how many women are experiencing this? How many women are being raped in marriage? We're not going to know, because how are they going to report it if it's not a crime? But even if we were to say, for argument's sake, that it's not really something that's happening, what does it mean that a woman can legally be raped by her husband? What does that mean about what we think about women? Personhood, ownership of our own bodies, ability to make our own decisions, and the actual function of marriage. Does it benefit women or does it harm us? You know, so there's a lot that you can dig into when you really think about the law, the way it's written, and our comfort with it.
We don't have discussions of marital murder or marital theft, you know, it's just theft. And whoever chooses to make the charge, okay, I mean, I could steal from you and you can say, well, you know, he's my friend, so I'm not going to do anything. But if you so decide, you can't have something like friend theft, okay, and say, let's excuse friend theft. No, if you're a victim and you decide that you are being abused in some way, then you should have the right to press charges.
Religion, and in this case the Christian religion, has been used and is used to protect, support, uphold, perpetuate male power and privilege. And I don't think God finds my life more valuable than my wife's. I don't think so. I don't think He gave me gifts but didn't give already to give to the world, to make manifest.
Marital rape is only one aspect of the system of gender-based violence perpetuated against women in the Bahamas without legal recourse. Another aspect includes physical, verbal, psychological, and sexual violence against cisgender and transgender women and men.
Under CEDAW and other human rights treaties, transgender women in particular are a part of the CEDAW Convention. In other words, when the Bahamas came before CEDAW, this was part of the conversation, right? So civil society brought it forward that transgender women were being abused and their rights were being violated. So the discussion took place in Geneva at this time. And so it is on the radar, certainly at that human rights level. Now, is it on the radar domestically? I think it's probably in spurts. I don't think it has a consistent profile. But the point I'm trying to make is because it was brought up at the human rights level in Geneva, the government then ought to come back and address the problem through the Department of Gender and Family Affairs. That is the machinery that is supposed to advocate for the rights of transgender women.
As long as you don't push your will on someone else, then where's the harm, man? Does me knowing, let's say I'm a Christian person, the fact that I know that transgenders exist, does that condemn me to hell because I know they exist? I know people who are drinking. Because I know people who are drinking, is it my job as a Christian to stop them from drinking? By the way, they take wine in church. Is it my job to stop them from drinking? Otherwise, I will go to hell?
In 1990, the World Health Organization released a report that said the Bahamas has the third highest prevalence of a condition that may result in intersex births. And we have tons of anecdotal evidence of unusually high numbers of intersex births and trans people in a particular part of the region that we're in, including the Dominican Republic, the Bahamas, and I think and Haiti, right? Science is telling you that this number may be far higher than you think it is. And you're still prepared to go forward with a legal exercise that will result in not just the legal invisibilization of these people, but it will result in a more hostile social, political, and public governance landscape for these people.
When we talk about women, we're thinking that women are homogeneous, and we're not. Women occupy different intersections of life, and so there's the marital status, which you can be married or not married. You can be lesbian, bisexual, gay, transgender, intersex. I mean, they're just different. Women with disabilities, all right, migrant women, asylum seekers who come here, older women. All of this is supposed to be under the panoply of CEDAW. So it's just not one woman who is to be advantaged, or one kind of woman, you know.
In our Constitution, we see we have color, race, creed, religion, but we don't have sexual orientation or gender identity. And that is the fight that we're doing. That's the advocacy work that we're doing on the ground to let decision makers and policy makers know we need to be included in these clauses, that we should be free from stigma, we should be free from discrimination, and we should be free from violence. As it is now, the reason why we have such an influx of migration of LGBTI Bahamian citizens into Canada and into the US is because these policies are in place. I can go rent a house as a trans person, but that person can discriminate against me because I'm trans and throw me out, and they have every legal right because it's not included in the clause that we cannot discriminate because of one's sexual orientation, known or perceived, or gender identity. And that's where we need to reach. That's where the Bahamas needs to get to, the black and white. We've signed on to many treaties and many conventions, but again, it takes political will.
Some feminists feel that the trans movement has usurped the women's rights movement, and the gender equality discussion has usurped the urgency or the need to focus on violence against women in particular, and all of the work that we still have left to do. And those feminists don't see the struggles as being the same, not even mutually inclusive, but they are inherently the same struggle. And so then my focus is now on how do we curate this space? How do we create a safe space for this type of dialogue so that we can move forward? Because until we get to that space where we can move forward, we'll never have what we call gender equality in this country in particular.
It is time for the rights that Erin is advocating for to be given. The time for women to have gotten equality was 30 years ago. We should be beyond that. You know, progressive societies are beyond that. They're not debating that issue. You see what I'm saying? And the problem is we're so late that now the two are happening at the same time in our country. And the reality is that we have such hatred as a patriarchal, as a macho society. We have such hatred of the feminine that any manifestation of the feminine.
LGBTI citizens cannot be themselves or be free. And again, they would say, yeah, they could be free, ain't nobody killing them, ain't nobody doing nothing to them. But are they included in the policy? Do we have them in the 2030 agenda? Are they inclusive in the SDGs when it says no poverty? Where in this country most trans women live below the line of poverty? Where most LGBTI citizens who cannot put on the persona of a butch or a masculine character, not able to access a job because they will be known as a distraction to the company because of their flamboyancy or their bubbly personalities. But we can discriminate against them because it's not in our books.
We had a controversy, self-made, many years ago when they would have these gay cruises, and obviously the cruises would come to the Bahamas as well as elsewhere. And we had a whole bunch of people just couldn't deal with it. I pity them. It was just like messing up their day. You know, like they hear the boat coming and they just whew, day off course, they can't figure it out, man. And I would say to myself, well, how does this impact them? So every day, I guess the guys would come off the boat, or girls, whoever, and they would be, just doing whatever they're doing and shopping and buying souvenirs. And then because of my mere exposure to this, the next day I say to my wife, I didn't need more like that. I think I go in male now. Is this what happens? Is this the impact of this? Because if it was, we'll all be, all of a sudden, every day, everyone changing.
I did a lecture here a couple of years ago, and we were talking about LGBTI matters, and someone in the audience said to me, oh, I was with my daughter at the mall, and we went to use the bathroom, and there was this butch woman, she came in there, and she shouldn't be in there. And, I didn't want my daughter to be exposed to that. I said, exposed to what? Someone coming to use the bathroom? Because, my first question is, did she say something to you or your daughter? No, but she was just looking I was like, why does that offend you? As black people, we forget. There was a time when they didn't want us to use their bathrooms. We couldn't use their bathrooms. We couldn't sit at their counters. We couldn't come and buy from their store at the front. We couldn't try on their shoes, right? Because our skin color. And we're saying, oh, but that's not an issue here, but we don't want those gay people here. It ought to be what you decide to do with your life as long as you are not violating other people's rights.
There are a lot of LGBT people who seek asylum in other countries, largely Canada. There are others who might not seek asylum, but they go off to school and choose not to come back because they can live better, easier, safer lives in other locations. And they can't be blamed for that. Some people choose to stay and choose to work toward a better reality. Some people choose to stay and just keep their lives, their private lives, private as possible to protect themselves. But to live a full and happy life of dignity and freedom, it's not happening here.
Are you beginning to understand why the phrase, "it's better in the Bahamas," may seem ironic to women living in the Bahamas? And there's more. While the Bahamas has the Employment Act, which states that there should be equal pay for men and women doing the same job, it's clear that's not the case. The United Nations Human Development Index report states the income disparity between Bahamian men and women was 32% in 2019.
The gender wage gap is a huge issue. And you might think that, okay, well, women aren't getting paid the same as men. Sucks to be a woman then. But women are heads of so many households and responsible for feeding the family. And it's quite impossible, actually, to have a full family on one income. So it affects everyone. It means that the man then, if there's a man in that household, has to pull more weight because his wife or girlfriend or partner or whatever it is isn't being paid an equal amount for an equal value of work. So it affects us economically. And that's just one really broad example that everyone can relate to.
That you should not be given privileges over her. She has the same education, same background, same talent. That you are not, because you have a different sexual organ, you should not be entitled to be ahead of her, make more than her, be her boss. As a son of a mother who was abused in her marriage, son of a mother who was discriminated against, was not allowed to go to high school because she was a girl, even though she had qualified for government high school. And she raised me. I would not want to see anyone go through what she went through. I have to be a feminist. If I love my mother, I have to be a feminist. If I love my sister, I have to be a feminist.
Moreover, since more than 70% of Bahamian households are led by women, the disparity contributes to wide-scale poverty in the population and further exploitation. In February 2022, the Gender-Based Violence National Discriminatory Law Review Forum revealed the Bahamas has the highest rate of female rape per capita in the Caribbean and indeed the world. Even more alarming is the fact that the Bahamas has held this infamous world title for the last 15 years since 2007. While the world average for female rape stands at 15 crimes per 100,000 people, the Bahamas has an alarming rate of 133 female rapes per 100,000. That's more than 780% higher than the world average. When one accounts for unreported incidents of rape, the number suggests a culture of violence against women rather than a mere crime statistic. When the United Nations, through its global database on violence against women, announced these figures, it called the Bahamas, quote, a very dangerous place for women.
I heard this knock. I knew the person. He came inside and he pulled a knife on me and he raped me. And all I begged him to stop, he would not stop. The next few weeks was gonna been the heaviest, I believe, because the lady took me to the doctor and I was pregnant. And him and the lady discussed an abortion. And I was supposed to get an abortion that following Wednesday. My mother came and she said, not a thing like it. I ain't killed none of y'all. You ain't gonna kill this one. She said, you gonna bring it. So my mother stopped me from having the abortion. Me and him started to talk, we started to date, and then I got pregnant with my first son for him, but my second child. And so, being pregnant, then the beating started. I remember one time he took a PVC pipe because I questioned him whilst I was 7 months pregnant, and he hit me across my stomach with it. And after he done beat me, he told me, get my F&A up, come go in the house. And when I went in the house, he pushed me down on the bed, take off your clothes, and he would rape me. I remember even drinking bleach whilst I was pregnant. I didn't drink the bleach to get rid of the child. I drank the bleach because I wanted to die. Like the beating and the pain was so much. I was already using drugs, drinking heavily, missing days from work, going to psych treatment to get medication to sleep, medication for depression and anxiety. I had already tried to slit my wrist several times. After that, I wanted to die so much time. I took overdose of pills. All type of stuff I was doing to myself, just trying to die, just trying to end this pain. I made up in my heart that, yeah, enough is enough and this is it. And I told my mom, I said, Mommy, I need you, like, until I catch myself, I need to be here. Until I catch myself. She said, no problem, sweetie. I was wondering what was keeping you so long. He kept coming back like every couple days or so. He called out to me and I said, what happened? Leave me alone. And then he pulled on me and he slapped me and said, I only want to talk to you, you know. My brother ran from inside of the house on the outside and picked up a 2x4 and started hitting him with it. And his hand ended up getting break. So right then I left to walk to the police station. So on my way to the police station, walking on Blue Road, this alleged officer stopped and say, where you going, young lady? And he flashed something that seemed like it was a police badge. And he said, I go into work right now, you know. And I tell him my kid's father keep harassing me. And I left him and he was beating me. And so he said, come, let me take you to the station. And on his way to go to this alleged station, he turned off. And I say, oh God, no. Say, sir, man, come on, man. Come on. Not again. He turned off in the back by the sports center. And the tran, when he went, it was like a bushy area. And he tried to rape me from in the car, but the trousers that I had on, he couldn't get it off. And I ended up like pushing the door open, and I got out and I started to run. And because I didn't know where I was or where I was going or how to get out, I just kept running, and he ran behind me. And when he caught me from back on, he pulled me back and he just tore my clothes off. And where he was so hot up, he just rests his penis right there and he just relieved himself. And I could see, like, because I kept screaming and fighting off, lights was like moving up and down. That was people coming to my rescue. When he saw the lights, he just pushed me off and jumped in his car and left. The people came. And they called the police. And the police came. But then God turned around and shift from hell to glory. When I met my husband, he was supportive. He was humble. He spoke to me with love. After we started to talk, I started to run from him, and he never could have figured out why I kept running. One day I went to run, and he caught my hand, and he said, why you keep running? I only want to love you. Why you always running from me? And I told him that I've been raped multiple times. I was raped as a child. I told him that I had a hard life. I told him that I didn't know how to love. You know, I was going through so much pain. It was like the pain would not stop. It was so constant. The pain was like coming right after each other. And here it is, you telling me you only want to love me after all these people that beat upon me, after all these people that do me so much wrong, after I've been raped so much times, after I've been dragged through the mud, after I've been sitting in hell so long, and you telling me you want to love me. How am I supposed to receive that? You understand? And so I didn't recognize it. I didn't know how to even begin to love my husband, even though I felt different about him. And so, like, we started talking about what I've been through, and we started talking about the rape when I was 15. And my husband, like, he just hold me and he allowed me to cry. And he told me to cry. And I cried and I cried and I cried like never before. And that was the first time I felt some type of relief.
At 23, Devontae McCartney is now on the road to recovery, but not before her experience of sexual abuse as a child took her down a treacherous path of substance abuse, prostitution, and being in and out of institutions like the Sandilands Rehabilitation Center and the Willa Mae Pratt Center for Girls. Starting at the tender age of 7, Devontae was repeatedly molested by her mother's boyfriend at the time. A few years later, at the age of 10, another of her mother's boyfriends would rape and molest Devontae while her mother worked.
I remember the first time I ever told her, I even wrote it on a letter. I wrote her a letter just because I couldn't get the words out. And it was like she kept turning a blind eye. She kept turning a blind eye. Like one time she beat me so bad because I blurted out in front of his daughters what was going on when they came home for Christmas event. And I told her, and I remember my remark was, I hate to have to pretend as if we a happy family or like everything good when she know everything ain't good. Why should I have to act like he's my daddy and act like he's a happy family when he's not my daddy? My own daddy didn't call me at Christmas or anything, so why have to act like we sisters? I don't want to be sisters, I want to be family and stuff like that. And she beat me bad. Yeah, and I told his daughters, he's a rapist because that's what he's been doing to me when they in there. It's not like my mom didn't have any idea or like it was a shock to, no, it was not. We were talking, and she said, you need to go and tell these people when we get there, everything what you been saying to me ain't no truth. As I said that just now, I almost felt the same reaction I felt the first time I ever heard my mommy say those words to me. And she said it again. She said, when we get there, you make sure to tell them whatever you was telling them ain't no truth. Because our family don't have no money to go pay for no lawyer and pay nobody to be dealing with these kind of things. I would feel like sometimes being high or being drunk, whatever, just the feeling, the substance feeling, used to take my mind off it. Like, I never wanted to think about the hurt she put me through. Like, just knowing I didn't have a mommy there to just like guide me. Like, worse when I would go to school and I see how other kids mom and nurture them. And that was a part of my life where I could really say I had to step out and do a lot more things that I knew was not myself. I can't ever see myself going back to doing those things because I know that ain't me. Like, not just even just sleeping around, just holding stuff, like being a girl who men see as you're a rider. That's what they would call it as. When I said that meaning, like, I could hold down guns, drugs, ammunition, that type of girl, like a real militant street girl. And I knew that was never me. And I always, even when doing it, I always knew, okay, I doing this just because I want to get out the ghetto, or I want to get a little apartment for me and my son, or I have rent to pay. It was never no, because that's what I love doing. It was just to survive. And I think this was one of the days in the ghetto when this is the most I ever prayed. And I went out there and I began to pray, and I prayed, and eventually I started to cry while they're praying. And I remember the guys them walking up and down through the little alley cut, they looking at me and everybody thinking like going crazy. I just sitting there crying, praying. And can I tell you, by the next month, my life started to shift. Sometimes God has sent me people like, who really going through, I need to hear my story, I need to hear a word from me. And then I had the same month in general, I had persons come to me and say, from they sit down to my name, they said, I only came to you just to vent or just to get away or just for some advice. And so it's ministry now for me. It's not even a business like that. What makes me more relieved about the situation, I watch God fight for me. I watch God handle the situation. And trust me, I watched over and over and over again. My mom was in situations where God put her in situations where she had to come back to me. And every time when she came back to me, he reminded me suddenly of when I would tell her, you do me like this now, or for this guy, or for him. But one day you're gonna come back to me, you gonna wish me, and you had the bond we had, I wish we had the relationship we had. And so it's not even hurting me as bad as I know it would hurt her, because as I heal and I grow and I learn life from my own self, I love my mom. I forgive my mom. I love my mom to the depths of me, like I've said, but I know how to love her from a distance.
My first abuse memory began at the age of 7. My father was my abuser, well, one of my abusers. We were watching television, one of those big floor model TVs, the ones that sit right on the floor. And we were watching TV. I was sitting next to him. Our backs were up against the sofa. And he just started to rub my leg and then put his hands in my underwear and fondle me. And I didn't know, obviously, at that age that what he was doing wasn't right and wasn't okay. And as time went on, he always told me that this was something that fathers do with their daughters to express love and affection. And, you know, children always want to please adults, especially adults who are in authority over them. And I loved my father still at the time and always wanted his affection and attention. And so, you know, of course, the abuse escalated into rape when I was 10, and at 11, I told my mother about it for the first time. When I first told her, I was under the impression that she did not know what had been going on for the past 4 years at that time. I later found out that she did know, but initially when I went to her, she told me that she didn't believe me. And she didn't want me to come back to her about it again, but I did. A few months later, went back to her asking, begging, in fact, for help. And her response to me was very different, which told me that she did believe me. She told me that I'd have to put up with it until I turned 18 and could leave the house legally on my own. I went to the priest, the head priest at the time. He was an archdeacon. I grew up in an Anglican church, and I told him about what was going on. And he didn't doubt me at all. In fact, he called a meeting within less than 3 days for sure, between my mother and I was so happy because I thought, okay, now finally someone believes me, someone's going to help me. But his advice, if you can call it that, to me was to honor my father and my mother and to not make trouble anymore. At the age of 13, I was also raped by a minister in my church. That was covered up by the church, by the same priest who had told me prior, right, to not say anything. So they covered that up as well. At the age of 15, I attempted suicide. I overdosed on a bunch of Tylenol. So what happened was I was removed. I was put into Grace House, which is a part of the Grand Bahama Children's Home. The way that it worked was my mother was allowed to have visitation with me in the presence of a social worker only. And my father wasn't allowed to have contact with me at all, which was great for me. But this one particular day, I was at school, and my mother came to my school without a social worker, which she knew she was not supposed to do. And she told me that if my father went to prison, she was going to kill herself. And she said that her blood would have been on my hands. And she asked me, do you want your mother to die? And of course I didn't want her to die. I didn't want her to kill herself. And she said, well, in order to keep me alive, you know what you have to do. So I recanted my statement to the police. I went to the police with my mother, told them, and a social worker was there too, if memory serves me correctly. I told them that I had lied about everything and I made everything up. And so I, of course, could no longer be in state custody. So they dropped all the charges against my father, and within the week, definitely within that week, I was sent back home. The abuse did not continue after that. Sexual abuse is so damaging to your mind, to your spirit, and the effects of it can last a lifetime. I mean, I'm almost 40, and I still have effects from my abuse. I struggle with anxiety. I am just recovering from my eating disorder that I had off and on since I was 13, I sometimes, I'm so anxious I can't even leave my house. In the years that I've been in the field of advocating for rape survivors, the church is one of the greatest offenders of not just abuses, but of covering up abuses. And it's horrible and it's awful. And I want nothing to do with the church ever again, ever. We are overrun with sexual predators, but even worse, we are overrun with people who protect them. Of the hundreds of women who have reached out to me since I began my advocacy in 2014, every single one of those women, their abuse was covered up. Every single one.
As a bigger bodied Black woman, and I think it's very important to state that, because there's a level of inequality that I face personally as a bigger bodied woman than anyone that might be deemed as more conventionally beautiful. So I've had an instance where I would have been sexually assaulted, would have walked into the police station, and I would have said I was assaulted, and the police officer looked me dead in the eye and said, "Why would he want you?"
Born in Wellington, Stewart, Alexis had to leave the Bahamas to live her life authentically and become the person she wanted to be.
I don't think there is ever a time in my life that I did not feel different from my siblings, different from the kids in the neighborhood. It was difficult for me to give words to what it was I was feeling, but I just knew that from the very beginning that I'm just different from everyone else that I knew, and because of that, it fed a certain amount of insecurity, a certain amount of shyness. I found myself always keeping people at a distance for fear of criticism, for fear of judgment. You're growing up in a body that you don't feel belongs to you anymore, or that you have no control over completely. I graduated from high school when I was 15, 16, and having to make decisions about my career, my future at such an early age was a lot of pressure. So it was definitely a difficult time. All the internal conflicts as well as the external forces that were, bearing down at me at the time. It's not a period of my life that I would like to revisit anytime soon. And I have a lot of empathy for teenage people going through the same things. It was very clear for me, even at an early age, that in order to live my life to the fullest, I would have to move away, surround myself with people who understood the plans I had for my life, my desire for my career, and how I wanted to fulfill my own destiny. I also felt it was important to have a certain amount of separation from the people in my family, so that what I did and how I lived and my choices didn't reflect on them. They wouldn't be painted with the same brush, as they say, because of the choices that I've made. And so at the right time, I made that decision that after university, I would, as an adult, start living on my own and trying to make my own way in my own career and my own life. And that was hard. That was hard, having to close or partially close the door to everything and everyone that I knew. But it was a necessary thing, I felt, for my mental health and survival and the whole works, yeah. If I had a role model, someone who had experienced the same things that I have experienced, handled the same challenges that I've been faced with, perhaps it would have been easier. I don't necessarily have to learn everything from the school of hard knocks by personal experience. Sometimes I can learn things from people who have had the experiences before. And for this reason, I would hopefully like to be able to be a role model to some extent for someone else, some young child, some young teenager going through the same things that I've experienced in life. It's an evolving process. I know who I am, but I'm still growing. I know where I am in my life right now, but I'm still on this journey. I'm happy with who I am to the extent that there's nothing that anyone can say about me that will make me love myself any less. Any dissatisfaction I have comes from just the goals that I've set for myself that I have yet to achieve. Those are the only challenges or things that I would change because, I'm working towards things. I think what has been a really important part of my life is the evolution. Constantly growing, constantly learning, constantly challenging myself to know more about who I am and to achieve all these dreams that have been floating in my head for so long.
Like every other country struggling to embrace gender equality, the way forward for the Bahamas is complex and multifaceted. Equality Bahamas says, to advance the rights of women in the Bahamas, we must first acknowledge and respect the diversity of women. They experience discrimination on the basis of their gender and other identity markers, including sexuality, race, class, income, nationality, disability, geographic location, and religion. Intersectionality is critical. Equality Bahamas calls for feminist policymaking, putting people in situations of vulnerability at the center, responding to their needs, and increasing their access to resources, services, and opportunities as a matter of priority. Gender equality is not about party politics. It's about human rights. And we must not allow ourselves to be sidetracked by political tribalism that will only weaken us as a force.
That's the legacy of the women's suffrage movement. They did exactly that. They eschewed the partisan politics and came together across party lines in the 40s and 50s. So, that's what's needed. I mean, that's what's needed for women's advocacy, is that we cut through all of that partisan politics and remain focused and with our eyes on the goal and work together to make it happen.
We have to create an infrastructure of intellectual thought and emotional intelligence, right? Whether it's in organizations or whatever, but we got to shift people from that political framework, because the political culture controls everything, and every conversation we have is filtered through that, and it can only go where the political culture allows it to go. We got to take that back. And when I say that, not destroy political culture, change it to cultures that feed us, that support us, and that can see the actual problems and drive us to the solutions.
The reality is the influence of the church in all of the issues that we are dealing with has been what has stopped the progress. Okay? Marijuana laws, Sunday shopping, marital rape, the referendum on women's rights. All of those particular issues has been majorly, significantly influenced by the church. Now, I'm not taking away anyone's rights to, state your position, but I'm saying that until you somehow either A, create a separation of church and state. And that does not mean, by the way, for those who want to jump on me, that you don't have to be founded on Christian principles. A Christian principle to me is just simply do unto others, which, by the way, if you were going to do unto others, you would not allow for things like marital rape or not having equal rights.
We need to be more passionate about social change. I mean, and for good reason, I guess, we deal like solely with economic, but so much of our problems is about social change that needs to happen. But there's no one that's passionate about making social change happen. You know, I see no vision as far as that goes, and that is where the problem lies. We need some people that are realizing that this social change is going to make economic change. We need to shift our focus so that everybody is working together, and we'll get more things done.
Given its commitments to CEDAW, the Bahamas must create and properly resource a national gender machinery. It must mainstream gender across and within all ministries and practice gender-responsive budgeting. As a matter of priority, it must criminalize marital rape, ensure gender-equal nationality rights, and add gender to the prohibited ground of discrimination. Critical to ending gender-based violence is a national campaign that addresses gender stereotypes, the imbalance of domestic and care work, and toxic masculinity.
Women and women's feminist groups needed to have a higher volume in our voice. I think I would like to take responsibility. I was part of groups that were fighting for the referendum, an affirmative vote for the referendum. And I think we needed to be louder, we needed to be more forceful, we needed to state our case more convincingly.
For men who aren't doing it at all, step up, do some of that work. For women who are doing it all, refuse. Just refuse to do it by yourself. When there's somebody else, there's a capable adult to help with that work. Even for people who can afford to pay people to help, to come in to do the landscaping and do the cleaning and do the cooking, it's usually the woman who has to supervise that work and direct that work. So there's a way that we can share that, and that would change so much about the way that we look at gender and we look at gender roles, which they're made up. We made them up. It would do so much to change the way that we see women and men and their roles, and to free up time. Because women are experiencing time poverty. And there's this idea that women's time is elastic. No matter what you add to a woman's list of things to do, she can keep doing it because this time could just keep being stretched and stretched and stretched, while men are not being stretched in the same way. So in the home, share that work, share that labor, that unpaid labor.
This idea that women are secondary to men. The man is the head of the household. The woman follows the man. A man can't rape his wife. This patriarchy that we have here is so deeply ingrained. We're raising generations of people that also think that way. So does it stand a chance if you put it to the people again? Not right now. I think you have to legislate.
How do we assign roles to men and women? How do we judge people based on what they're doing? How they're dressed, or if they wear their hair short or long, or if they're dark skin or light skin. These are real issues that when I say, you know, because in each of our families we probably would have the rainbow, which I certainly have, and we talk about these issues a lot, where my daughter, who is dark skinned, may not have the same privilege sometimes in this very country as some light skinned little girl, right? And so we have to have those kinds of conversations and be authentic about them, and not pretend that we live in a world that we're not living in. There are gay people, there are trans people, there are lesbians, there are a rainbow of people, there are migrants. What are we going to do about it? How are we going to deal with it? And in a way that causes us to move forward as a country in a positive way. And for me, it's that very issue. what kind of Bahamas do you want to see in the future?
The problem with school is that, and I'm someone who did well in school, but like you didn't teach me anything really about life. I came out of school and there was no focus on your emotional intelligence, no focus on being tolerant, understanding, knowing how to disagree, how to argue without it turning to violence, on how to be resilient, how to have compassion and empathy. This issue again too about human emotions, your right to feel certain things. So for instance, vulnerability is not something that males are supposed to show or feel. That's crazy. You cannot love if you're incapable of being vulnerable. So this is real. I know that what I'm proposing won't be easy, won't be simple, that there will be conflict around it. But you asked me, how do we get to a better place? And I'm saying to you, this is how we get to a better place.
And make sure the Department of Gender and Family Affairs has the budget to do their job so they're able to carry out more community-based initiatives.
There needs to be stiffer penalties for adults who cover up abuse. It's already illegal, but it's not enforced the way it ought to be. And the penalty is not as high as it should be. In my opinion, if you cover up abuse, you're worse than the abuser. And we have way too many adults in our society who cover up for sexual predators. I mean, if that law had been, enforced in my own family, several people would have been rounded up. Several people from the church would have been rounded up. There would have been just a whole lot of people going into Fox Hill because they refused to do the right thing. Also, we have to combat the mindset and the culture that fosters silence in this country, because when survivors come forward, they are either disbelieved, or they are believed, but they're vilified and they're blamed for what has happened to them. That's why so many survivors don't want to come forward about, what has happened to them, because all of a sudden now your life becomes dissected. What did you do? What did you wear? What did you say? Where did you go? And you are made to share blame and share responsibility with your abuser. That should never be.
It starts with education and sensitization. For example, you can put laws and you can put policies, but it's still the mindsets of the Bahamian people or the citizens. For example, the Bahamas was the first country to decriminalize same-sex intimacy on our books in 1991. The Bahamas was the first in the region to do that. But yet we still have inequalities of discrimination. We still have acts of violence towards LGBTI people or people of that sexual orientation. So we can make laws and policy, but it takes the mindsets and it takes education and sensitization for communities to be able to display, to make the law of effect, to make it become life, and change people's characters and their attitudes towards inequalities. We're still educating and sensitizing people about LGBTI communities even after the referendum. But we noticed that the people have stopped sensitizing and educating women in the country on why this is important. This is not a moment of education for a season because we got a check or a contract to educate. No, this should be an ongoing process for our country members, for citizens to understand the importance of the referendum and what was the importance and why it's important to have women's equality. LGBTI rights are human rights. And women's rights are human rights. And until we begin to educate our community and our citizenry on what is human rights, we will always go back to square one and we will always be the laughingstock of the world. It takes true education and sensitization on these issues continuously for our people to understand the way forward if we're going to progress here in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas.
It starts in very small ways, these very little things that we can do to show that there is humanity in everybody that we need to respect, and there are rights that we need to protect.
I will be silent no longer. That's what it takes. And the willingness to help shift another woman's crown, to help fix another woman's crown. Say, you know what? My sister's doing this. I'm gonna come alongside her. I'm gonna go and support her. Yes, we will go to Bay Street. Yes, we will go to Parliament Square and say, listen, we're coming together, and we're coming together in mass numbers because we are 50% of the electorate, and we will not be silent.
There are women from all walks of life across the archipelago of the Bahamas who have been in the trenches fighting for our rights for decades. Some by their life experiences, some on the political stage, and some in community groups, and some in the church. Their actions screaming out for equal rights, falling on deaf ears. These are the heroes of the equal rights movement in the Bahamas. We cannot stop now. Let's continue the fight.
Her smile, a mask that keeps her above. What was meant to break her desire only fuels her passion and fire. She's come to know her worth and walk in power. The strength of a woman, none can compare. The strength of a woman is felt everywhere. Through the hardest test, fighting for equality, she never rests. She's the one who does it all.